It was the kind of scream that stopped your heart. A sharp, terrified wail cut through the sticky afternoon heat, bouncing off concrete walls and empty windows. It was the sound of someone small and helpless, someone in pain, and it was followed by laughter, the kind of laughter that wasn't joyful but cruel, cold, and ugly. And just like that, everything changed. Olivia Miller wasn't a woman who usually stopped, not for heat, not for hunger, not even for pain. Life had taught her to keep moving, that if you paused, the world would roll right over you. She lived on the south side of Austin, a forgotten corner of the city where the sidewalks cracked like old skin and the buildings sagged like tired bones. Nothing there was shiny, nothing was new, except maybe the hunger in people's eyes. Olivia was in her late 30s, though her eyes made her look older, eyes that had seen too many storms. Her skin was deep brown, weathered but beautiful, and her wiry frame moved with a kind of tired Olivia. Today, her hair was tied back with a faded red bandana. Her blue cotton dress clung to her like damp leaves in the relentless heat. In one hand, she clutched two overstuffed grocery bags. The canvas handles bit into her fingers. Inside were a few cans, some potatoes, a loaf of bread, and milk that might expire tomorrow. In the other hand, she held the leash of her old blind dog, Marley, who was slowly tapping along beside her, sniffing at curbs and panting from the heat. It was almost 3 p.m., and the air felt like it was trying to smother her. The sun blazed overhead, baking the cracked asphalt until it shimmered like water. Every surface reflected heat. Every breath was thick, but she was close to home now. Just 2 more blocks. She could already picture the pitcher of sweet tea sweating on her. Counter. Maybe she'd even pour it over crushed ice and sit on the steps for 5 minutes. Just 5. Then she heard it. The scream. Olivia froze. Her eyes snapped toward the sound. Across the street, just beyond the empty gas station that had been boarded up since last winter, she saw them. 2 boys, maybe 15 or 16, lean and mean, circling something like vultures. And in the middle of their ring sat a boy. He was small, fragile-looking. His legs were twisted awkwardly in a worn-out wheelchair that looked far too big for his frame. The front wheel was bent. One side had sunk into a pothole. He wasn't going anywhere. His blonde hair stuck to his forehead in sweaty clumps. His polo shirt, meant to be white, was clinging to him, soaked in sweat and stained with dirt. His face was pale, frightened. His hands trembled on the wheel rims, but the chair wouldn't budge. His eyes, big, blue, wild, were darting back and forth like a trapped animal. The bullies were laughing, not the kind of laugh you want to join in. One of them grabbed the wheelchair's handle and spun it so fast the boy almost tipped the bowl. Other kept poking at the spokes with a stick. "Come on, roll away, tough guy," one sneered. "What's the matter? Wheels stuck?" the other barked. Olivia felt something explode in her chest. Anger. Not the slow, burning kind, but a lightning bolt of fury that hit her all at once. She didn't think. She just dropped everything. The grocery bags hit the pavement with a thud. Cans rolled, potatoes bounced, bread flattened. Marley gave a startled bark, stepping back. Olivia was already across the street, storming forward, like a force of nature. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the thick air like a whip. "You two, get away from him!" The boys spun, startled. One muttered something, the other looked guilty. Then they ran, slapping sneakers against hot pavement, disappearing behind the gas station like rats. Olivia rushed to the boy. Her breath was fast, her heart racing. She dropped to one knee close enough to see his lips quivering. But she didn't reach out just yet. She didn't want to scare him more. "It's okay now, baby," she said, gently, her voice low and calm. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you." He blinked, barely able to speak. When he finally did, his voice was a whisper, dry and thin. My phone. It's dead. Can't call. His head lolled. His cheeks were flushed with fever. Sweat clung to his eyelashes. Olivia leaned in, her chest tight. She wiped his forehead with the corner of her dress. He was burning up. She could feel the heat rising off him like a stove. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "Lou Lucas," he croaked. "Okay, Lucas," she said, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "You just hang on now. I got you." She grabbed the wheelchair's handles, unlocked the rusty brakes, and started pushing. The wheels groaned. The back right one wobbled dangerously, and the front left kept catching in every crack and patch of gravel. But Olivia didn't stop. The trip that usually took her 8 minutes took nearly 30. She had to push the broken chair up curbs, around potholes, and over tree roots that had busted through the concrete. Her arms burned. Her back screamed. Sweat soaked her dress until it clung to her ribs. But she didn't stop. Not when Lucas whined and tried to walk in the shade. Not when Lucas slumped further, mumbling nonsense words, his fever growing worse. Not when the sun dipped lower and turned everything gold and red. She kept pushing. And as she did, something happened in the silence. Something quiet but huge. The world paused. The wind held its breath. And an ordinary woman, who had every reason to walk past and protect her own, chose instead to carry a stranger, a sick, broken, frightened child. She chose love, and it changed everything. Olivia's trailer sat crooked on a patch of dusty ground, at the edge of the neighborhood. The white paint had peeled away years ago. The steps creaked and groaned under her weight as she guided the wheelchair up with all her might. The door creaked open as Olivia shoved the wheelchair inside, one hand guiding Marley, the other bracing herself against the frame. The trailer's metal floor groaned beneath their weight. The air inside was thick and unmoving, scented with old pine wood, warm laundry, and a fading sweetness. Last night's apple crumble. It was home, but tonight it felt smaller, heavier, like the walls knew something was wrong. Lucas slumped deeper into the chair, barely conscious. His skin was pale and waxy, as if the heat had drained the color right out of him. Tiny beads of sweat kept blooming on his forehead, and his lips were cracked open, whispering something Olivia barely caught. Thank you." His voice was so faint, it sounded more like the rustling of paper than a word. Olivia's heart clenched painfully. She steered him gently toward her old couch, parking the wheelchair close enough so she could still reach. Him. Her hands moved fast but soft, like a mother tending a feverish child. She grabbed a damp rag from the sink, cooled it under the tap, and brought it to his face. "You're all right now, baby. I got you," she whispered. She touched his cheeks, wiped the sweat, and offered a glass of water. Lucas sipped once, then turned away, his breath catching in shallow gasps. His chest rose and fell unevenly, the sound of it like a whistle caught in a storm. Something wasn't right. Not at all. Olivia could feel it, not in her mind, but in her bones. That old, deep ache of knowing when something is slipping through your fingers. She bolted to the kitchen, counter, her hands trembling. Her old flip phone lay buried beneath unopened mail, rubber bands, and a jar of mismatched buttons. She snatched it up and pressed the power. The screen flickered twice, then went dark. No bars, no signal, not even static. God, she breathed. Not now. In Brookhaven, when the weather turned or the tower blinked out, even the airwaves stopped working. And today, of course, the universe had chosen silence. She looked back. Lucas let out a soft whimper. He was curled up in the chair now, like a wounded animal, his arms wrapped tightly around himself. His once wide eyes were now glassy, unfocused, barely blinking. Olivia dropped the useless phone onto the counter with a clatter. Her mind raced. There was no time to think. No one to call. No one coming. She turned in place, searching for a solution. And then, her eyes landed on the corner of the living room. Covered with a thin white sheet, barely touched in months, sat her most precious thing. Her mother's sewing machine. A vintage black Singer, still polished beneath the dust. Its gold script shimmered in the afternoon light. It had sewn school dresses, repaired church clothes. It was the last piece of her mother she had. Not just a machine, but a memory. She stared at it. For a second, she didn't move. Then she did. She yanked off the cloth. The metal gleamed like it remembered glory. She clutched it close to her chest like a baby. Careful, delicate, but with purpose. "Hold on, Lucas," she whispered. Marley barked nervously as Olivia stormed out the door. The sun was still brutal outside. The sidewalk burned her feet through her shoes. But she didn't stop. She passed the broken fire hydrant. The corner. Bodega. The boarded-up barber shop. 3 blocks later, she reached the pawn shop. A squat, ugly building wedged between a closed laundromat and a liquor store with a broken neon OPN sign buzzing like a mosquito. She didn't wait. Olivia pushed the door open hard. A tiny bell above it let out a high, useless chime. The man behind the counter didn't even look up at first. Just a balding guy with greasy glasses, skin the color of ash, and fingers yellowed from too many cigarettes. A fan turned lazily behind him, pushing stale air. She slammed the machine on the counter. He blinked. "How much?" she asked. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. He stared at the machine, ran a lazy hand across it, then shrugged. 50. 50, she whispered, like the word punched her in the gut. "That's all I can do," he muttered, already turning back to his screen. Olivia closed her eyes. Her jaw clenched. Her chest hurt. It wasn't enough, but it was something. She nodded once. "Fine." She grabbed the money, creased bills rough and damp from his hand, and ran. Next stop, the pharmacy. It sat just next door, half-empty shelves and flickering lights. Inside, she rushed straight to the back. She knew what to look for. Pedialyte. Fever medicine. 2 cartons of chicken soup. That was it. That was everything she could afford. She dumped the bills into the cashier's hand, didn't even wait for change. Then she ran. Back outside, she looked toward the east, toward 7th and Monroe. That's where the walk-in clinic was. 7 blocks. She could have waited for the bus, but there was no time. She returned to the trailer, burst inside, grabbed Lucas, who by now looked more ghost than boy, and carried him. She scooped him up like he weighed nothing, because he almost did. His head fell gently against her shoulder, and his arms hung limp. Olivia's legs shook. Her lungs screamed. Every few steps, she had to stop, but she didn't let go. The streets blurred past. 2 kids skateboarding paused and watched. A man leaned against a lamppost and said nothing. A breeze stirred the dust as if the sky itself held its breath. By the time she reached the clinic, she was drenched in sweat. Her dress clung to her like a second skin. Her hands were numb from the grip, but she pushed the door open. The lights overhead buzzed cold and bright. The air smelled like bleach and metal. Olivia stepped to the front desk. A woman with glasses and a name tag that read Denise looked up. "My name is Olivia Miller," she said, barely catching her breath. "This boy, he's sick. He's burning up." Denise looked past her and nodded quickly. "Room 4. Right now." A nurse appeared, holding the door open. Olivia carried Lucas through, placed him on the exam table, and sat beside him. She pulled the cloth from her bag and pressed it gently to his forehead again. His skin sizzled under her touch. He didn't open his eyes. Did he even know she was still there? She whispered quietly, over and over, "You're safe now. I'm not leaving. I promise." For a moment, it was just the sound of the wall clock, ticking and the hum of a far-off monitor. Then something shifted. From the hallway, Olivia saw a nurse standing near the reception desk. Young, pale, blue scrubs neatly pressed, lips pulled tight like she'd just smelled something bad. The nurse leaned toward Denise and whispered something. Then she looked, right at Olivia, then at Lucas, then back again. It was a look Olivia had seen before. Suspicion, fear, judgment, like she didn't belong here. Like she wasn't supposed to have a sick child in her arms unless he looked like her. Olivia's stomach sank. 15 minutes later, the door opened again. The sound of boots on tile echoed like a drum beat in a funeral march. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the clinic waiting area. The taller one had shoulders like a doorframe and a military haircut that made him look even more severe. His eyes swept the room quickly before landing on her, Olivia, sitting beside the sick boy she had carried through the heat. He motioned toward her with a slow, deliberate hand. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and even, "we're going to need you to come with us." The words struck her like a slap. Olivia's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her voice caught in her throat, tangled in disbelief. Her heart thundered, and she instinctively looked down at Lucas, this small, fragile boy who had barely survived the walk here. The boy she'd pulled from the jaws of cruelty in the street. The boy she had saved. His eyelids fluttered weakly, then lifted just enough to see her. His little hand, trembling, reached into the air like he was trying to hold onto her shadow. "No," he gasped. It wasn't just a word. It was a plea, a cry. She helped me. "She saved me," he whispered, barely louder than a breath. And the entire room stilled. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, but even they seemed to hesitate in the air. The world shrank into that moment. The nurse at the counter froze, mid-keystroke. The receptionist blinked but didn't speak. One of the officers, slightly younger, with kind eyes beneath his furrowed brow, shifted uncomfortably. The bigger one glanced sideways at him. Olivia stood there, her hands slightly raised like someone balancing on the edge of a cliff. Her heart pounded so loudly it muffled everything else. She didn't know if they were going to cuff her or question her. But Lucas's words now hung in the room like something sacred, fragile. The taller officer let out a breath, rubbing the back of his neck. The younger one stepped forward gently, his tone softened. "All right, ma'am. We need to check a few things, but you can stay with him for now." Relief washed over her like a crashing wave. Her knees buckled from the flood of it, and she sank back into the plastic chair beside Lucas. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her breath came in jagged gasps, as if her body was just now realizing it could exhale. The officers stepped aside and began speaking into their radios. Quiet, clipped words like verify, background, and possible guardian. Olivia leaned in closer to Lucas, brushing a fresh layer of sweat from his brow with the rag she still clutched in her palm. "You did good, baby," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You did real good." Time stretched in that tiny, overlit clinic room. Outside, the world spun, but here, between her and Lucas, everything slowed to a heartbeat. Then the click of heels broke the silence. Sharp, intentional, echoing with authority. Olivia turned and saw a woman striding through the clinic's entrance. She wore a sleek black suit, not a wrinkle in sight. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her face was set in practiced calm. Not a cop, not a nurse. She was something else entirely. A lawyer. The woman flashed credentials so quickly Olivia couldn't read them, then leaned in and spoke in low, urgent tones with the officers. Heads nodded. Questions passed between them like hot stones. All the while, Olivia sat frozen, one hand on Lucas's shoulder, the other still gripping his. Finally, the woman approached. "You're Ms. Olivia Miller?" she asked. Olivia nodded slowly. My name is Dana Holloway. I'm a legal representative for the Graham family. I've been trying to locate this boy for the last 24 hours. Her gaze softened just slightly. His name is Lucas Graham. Olivia blinked. Ellington? Dana nodded. Yes, his father. Is Edward Graham, owner of Graham Group. And with that, the full truth landed. Olivia knew the name. Everyone did. Real estate mogul, billionaire, glass buildings with his name on the top, a face on TV that always smiled but never looked real. That's whose child she had rescued from the street. The floor seemed to tilt. Olivia sat back heavily, her brain spinning. She'd been wiping sweat from the forehead of a boy who lived in a world of private jets and boardrooms. And not once had it occurred to her that he could be anyone other than just a child in trouble. The officers, the nurse, the lawyer, and now a doctor surrounded Lucas, examining him, adjusting machines, asking questions she didn't understand. Through it all, Lucas's hand stayed in hers, and when it came time to move him, to wheel him through double doors into another room, his grip tightened. His eyes, still cloudy, found hers. Don't wave, he whispered. Just that. Just 2 words. But she knew what he meant. He didn't want this to be goodbye. She tried to smile, tried to be strong. But the moment his fingers slipped from hers, her chest hollowed out. She stood in the hallway as the doors closed behind him. An hour later, those same doors opened again, but only for her. The officers thanked her quietly. The lawyer offered a card, which Olivia took, but didn't read. The receptionist handed her a bottle of water she hadn't asked for. And then she was outside. Alone. The sun was still high, still hot, pressing down like a judgment. She looked up the street. It was empty, quiet, as if the last few hours hadn't happened at all. She walked, 1 block, then another. Lucas met her at the corner, having somehow wandered after her. Together, they returned to the trailer. The trailer looked the same as it had this morning, tired, leaning, as if it too had lost something. Olivia stepped inside, the quiet swallowing her whole. She dropped her keys on the table. The sound echoed like a bell in a tomb. Then she sat, on the couch, in the same place where Lucas had rested, and she wept, not loud, not messy, just quiet tears that slid down her cheeks and soaked into her dress. Tears of exhaustion, of fear, of something so much bigger than she could name. That night, she didn't sleep. The next day, she drifted through her chores like a ghost. She wiped down counters that were already clean, folded laundry twice, boiled water for tea, then forgot to drink it. The world spun without her. In the rare moments when she stopped, she saw his face. Lucas's pale skin, his cracked lips, the way he clung to her hand like it was the last solid thing in the world. Was he okay? Was he with people who loved him? Had he already forgotten the woman who walked him home on broken feet? On the 3rd morning, just as the sun stretched over the rooftops, a low rumble stirred the air outside. Not thunder, an engine, steady, deep. Olivia stepped to the window and pulled the curtain back. A black Cadillac Escalade rolled to a stop. Outside her trailer, it gleamed like oil under the rising sun, spotless and silent. She walked towards her porch. The gravel crunched softly beneath polished shoes as the man approached. Olivia watched, unsure if she was dreaming. The sunlight flashed off the sleek black Cadillac parked in front of her trailer. A car that didn't belong anywhere near the cracked sidewalks and sagging fences of her neighborhood. It glistened like something out of a magazine, out of another life entirely. But it wasn't the shine that froze her in place. It was the man's eyes. There was something in them that silenced the world. Not wealth, not arrogance, not the power that usually came with a vehicle like that. What she saw was exhaustion. Not the kind caused by long meetings or late flights. This was deeper, hollow, human. He walked toward her with careful, measured steps, each footfall deliberate, like a man stepping into sacred ground. The sharp crease of his suit, the gleam of his shoes, the smooth curve of his silver-streaked hair. They all spoke of money, of status. But none of it mattered when he looked up at her. When he reached the bottom of her porch steps, he removed his sunglasses and met her eyes. "Ms. Miller?" he asked, his voice low and rich, threaded with something rare. Respect. Olivia's lips parted, but no sound came out. She could only nod. "I'm Edward Graham," he said gently. "I'm Lucas's father." The name hit her chest like thunder. Edward Graham, the real estate giant, the man on the news, the billionaire behind half the buildings downtown, a man whose name opened doors across the country. And here he was, on her porch, speaking to her like she was someone worth talking to. Olivia's hand trembled as she motioned toward the crooked porch chair beside her. "Have a seat," she managed. Edward nodded once in thanks and lowered himself into the chair with a surprising Olivia that didn't quite fit the cut of, his suit. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The cicadas buzzed in the trees above like a living backdrop, and Marley, her blind old mutt, sniffed suspiciously at Edward's expensive shoes before curling up nearby. Finally, Edward leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. His voice was quieter now. "Lucas told me everything. About the heat, about the boys who tormented him, about how you stepped in, carried him, stayed." Olivia shifted uncomfortably. She brushed invisible lint from her lap, unsure what to do with the praise. "I just did what anyone would have done," she murmured. Edward's smile was faint, but real. "No, Ms. Miller," he said. "You did what most wouldn't." The words sank deep. He drew a breath and sat back. Lucas was born with osteogenesis imperfecta. It's a genetic condition. His bones are as fragile as glass. He's had fractures from sneezing, from hugs. Olivia's eyes widened. She remembered how light he'd felt in her arms, how carefully she'd moved him, how she'd worried she might hurt him just by touching him. "We've spent his whole life shielding him," Edward continued. "Doctors, aides, private tutors, drivers. He's never gone anywhere without someone hovering." He laughed once, but it was short and bitter. That day, he slipped away. Said he wanted to feel normal, wanted to roll around by himself for once. And we panicked. We thought... His voice caught. Then he looked her square in the eyes. "But the worst didn't happen. Because of you." Olivia blinked hard. Her throat closed. "I'm not here just to say thank you," he added. "I'm here because you gave my son something I couldn't buy him. Safety, kindness, courage. And I want to give something back." Olivia shook her head immediately, her hands lifting in protest. "I don't need anything," she said. "That boy needed help, that's all." Edward studied her for a long moment. "And that," he said, "is exactly why you deserve it." They sat in silence again, the Austin heat wrapping around them like a thick curtain. And for the first time in a long while, Olivia felt something rise in her chest that wasn't worry or weariness. It was light. It was hope. That afternoon, the Cadillac pulled away, disappearing down the same sun-scorched road it had come in on. But the silence it left behind wasn't empty. Olivia stood by her screen door long after the dust had settled, staring out at nothing, her heart pounding with something she couldn't yet name. She returned inside, went about her evening as best she could, swept the kitchen, washed the same 2 plates, refilled Marley's bowl. But her hands trembled the entire time. That night, she didn't sleep. And the next day, the rhythm of her life felt out of step. She reheated leftovers and forgot to eat. She folded laundry that Didn't need folding. She tried to scrub the front steps, but her eyes kept drifting to the horizon, as if it might deliver another surprise. 3 days passed, and on the fourth, just as the first blush of dawn painted the sky in soft peach and lavender, Olivia stepped onto her porch with a chipped mug of coffee and the weight of habit in her bones. The world felt unusually still. And then she heard it, a low rumble, deep and steady, growing louder. She squinted down the street. What she saw made her drop her coffee. Not one car, a caravan. Black SUVs rolled slowly toward her home like a quiet procession, engines humming like content panthers. Behind them followed 2 long delivery trucks, white with shimmering gold lettering across the side. Ellington Group. Olivia didn't breathe. The caravan came to a stop directly in front of her house. Doors opened, and the first person to emerge wasn't Edward. It was Lucas. He sat proudly in a brand-new wheelchair, upright and glowing. His face was no longer pale. His eyes sparkled beneath a new haircut. He wore a soft blue sweater and neat khakis. He looked strong, alive. The moment he saw her, his face broke into the widest grin she'd ever seen. "Miss Olivia!" he shouted, his voice clear and full. Olivia stumbled down the porch steps before she realized her legs had moved. She crouched beside him, eyes already brimming with tears. "You look better, baby," she whispered, cupping his cheek. "Because of you," Lucas said simply. She laughed softly, but the sound caught in her throat. Behind him, Edward exited. One of the SUVs, this time dressed in jeans and a button-down. No tie, no watch. Just a man with gratitude in his step. "Ms. Miller," Edward said, nodding with the warmth of a guest but the certainty of someone who had made up his mind. "Hope you don't mind unannounced visitors." Olivia gave a short, disbelieving laugh, the kind that carries a crack of emotion right behind it. "Well," she said, wiping her hands on her apron and blinking fast, "I've had stranger knock on that gate." Edward turned slightly and gestured to the trucks behind him, the 2 big delivery rigs and the matching SUVs that had arrived like a convoy. "We'd like to give something back. To you, and to this neighborhood, in your name, if you'll allow it." Olivia opened her mouth, ready to protest, but the wind caught the loose door of her trailer and creaked it open. For just a moment, no one said a word. The sun shone through the gap, casting light on a scene that needed no explanation. The chipped paint, the sagging wood planks of the porch, and the empty corner inside where her mother's sewing machine once sat. Now a sacrifice given for a boy's life. Edward saw it all. He didn't wait for her answer. He already knew it. What unfolded next felt like magic spilling out of reality. Too vivid, too surreal to belong to the ordinary rhythm of her days. Workers in crisp navy, shirts began unloading. First came the beams of lumber, neatly stacked. Then came power tools, fresh cans of paint, stacks of tile, copper piping. The street echoed with the buzz of hammers and drills, with ladders hitting pavement and tape measures snapping in the wind. Neighbors spilled onto their porches, shielding their eyes from the light. Some came barefoot in slippers, others with babies on hips or phones in hand. They stood along the sidewalk, gaping at the transformation taking shape in real time. Children pointed, elders whispered, and Marley, her faithful old dog, barked like the whole world had finally come to life. This wasn't a patch job. This wasn't a fix. This was a resurrection. By sundown, Olivia's trailer, the one that had leaned and creaked and held her together through years of solitude, was gone. In its place stood a brand-new prefab cottage. It wasn't large, but it was radiant in its simplicity. Fresh, white siding, soft gray shutters, and a sloping roof that gleamed in the dying sun. A ramp curved gently to the front door, built just wide enough for a wheelchair. A porch stretched across the front, perfectly measured for 2 rocking chairs. But that wasn't all. 2 blocks down, where an empty lot had sat unused for a decade, another team had broken ground. Bulldozers cleared brush. Workers laid concrete frames. Signs were hammered into the soil. The Olivia Miller Learning Center, a youth space filled with promise, one that would house shelves of books, art supplies, computers, tutoring rooms, and a warmth that couldn't be bottled or sold. A place where children who felt forgotten might find someone who saw them. Olivia stood at the edge of her porch, too stunned to speak, her hand pressed to her heart. Inside her new kitchen, on a polished wood counter that smelled faintly of lemon oil and new beginnings, lay a thick envelope. She opened it with fingers still coated in sawdust and disbelief. Inside, she found a check, one she couldn't comprehend, a number so large it made her knees weak, and beneath it, a folded piece of monogrammed stationery. Handwritten in steady, looping ink were words she'd never forget. For every life you've touched, for every kindness that went unseen, you are seen now. Let this be your legacy. Edward. She sat at her new kitchen table and cried, not because she was scared, but because for the first time in years, she didn't have to be. In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary began to happen across Edgefield. The town didn't just change, it exhaled. The quiet, broken streets grew louder with laughter. Neighbors who once passed each other without a glance now waved from porches. Strangers helped carry groceries. Teens who used to toss bottles behind the church now showed up with paintbrushes and tarps to fix its walls. One morning, a boy, one of the same ones who had tormented Lucas on that blistering day, knocked on Olivia's fence with his hands in his pockets and his voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am," he said, "do you mind if I water the flowers?" Olivia blinked, then smiled. "Go ahead, son. They could use the love." The community didn't just see Olivia now, they followed her lead. Lucas and Olivia kept in touch every Sunday afternoon, just before her favorite gospel radio show. Their calls were filled with silly stories, updates about school, and questions about her garden. He always greeted her with the same bright smile. "Hey, Grandma Olivia!" And though she always rolled her eyes and huffed, "Now don't go. Aging me, boy," she never corrected him. Because deep down, the name felt right. It was a name born not of blood, but of rescue, of kinship, of love. And that, she thought, was the truest kind of family. The seasons shifted gently into fall. Austin's trees turned golden and red, their leaves crunching underfoot like dry confetti. The thick heat gave way to soft breezes, and porch lights clicked on earlier as days shortened. Olivia sat in a new, white rocking chair, sipping coffee from her favorite blue mug, now resting on a clean porch that didn't groan underfoot. In her lap, a folded newspaper. The headline stretched in bold black print, "From saving one to saving a town. The woman who changed Edgefield." The byline told her story, how she'd stopped on a boiling summer street and changed a life. It talked about Lucas, about the youth center, about the quiet shift that had spread like sunlight through cracked blinds. She read it slowly, eyes lingering on every word like each sentence was a stitch in a memory quilt. It was surreal. How had her name, her quiet, everyday name, ended up printed in a paper sold in cities she'd never seen? She folded it carefully and rested it on the table beside her. She didn't need to read it twice. She was living it. Then came the invitation, stamped with a gold seal, delivered in a formal white envelope. She was being invited to Washington, D.C. to the Women of Courage, National Recognition Ceremony, a televised gala to honor those who had made a lasting difference through acts of selflessness. Olivia laughed when she read it the first time, laughed until tears came. She had no dress, no luggage. She'd never stepped foot on a plane. She wasn't someone who stood in ballrooms, she stood in kitchens. But Edward called. And more importantly, Lucas did too. He stared at her through the screen on their Sunday call, eyes sparkling, and said, "You better be there, Grandma Olivia. I've got a surprise." That did it. She called the number on the card. She said yes, not for the cameras, not for the applause, but for the boy who had once whispered, "Don't wave," and for every life that now waved back. And now, just 7 days later, Olivia Miller stood frozen behind the velvet curtain of a grand ballroom in Washington, D.C. The air buzzed with elegance and tension. Above her head, chandeliers dripped crystal like frozen raindrops, their light dancing across polished marble floors. The ballroom pulsed with energy. Rows upon rows of guests, senators, athletes, doctors, educators, soldiers, filled the velvet-lined chairs, their murmurs hushed by anticipation. Cameras clicked softly. A string quartet hummed in the corner. Olivia had never seen anything like it. Her shoes, borrowed and slightly too tight, felt foreign. Her dress, a simple navy blue gown chosen by Edward's assistant, brushed her ankles. With every shift of her weight, she held a tiny silver clutch in trembling hands, her palms damp. Behind her, a staff member gave a small nod. It was time. A man in a tailored tuxedo, the evening's MC, stepped to the podium, his voice smooth as honey and confident as thunder. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight we celebrate courage, not the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet sort. The kind that kneels instead of runs, that gives when there is nothing left to give, that sees a child in danger and chooses compassion over caution." Backstage, Olivia felt her throat tighten. "And to present this honor," the host continued, "is someone who knows that courage firsthand." A hush fell over the crowd. The velvet parted. And there, under the spotlight's embrace, rolled Lucas. No longer pale or trembling, no longer haunted. He wore a tiny black tuxedo that shimmered beneath the chandeliers. His hair was combed neatly, his eyes alive and steady. As he wheeled himself across the stage, the crowd rose to their feet. There were gasps. Hands flew to mouths. Phones lifted. Flashes blinked. Some people clapped. Others simply stood in awe. Lucas reached the podium and adjusted the mic with practiced care. His hands shook just a little. But his voice? It rang out clear. "She gave me back my life," he said. "So now, I want the world to know her name." The applause came like thunder, rolling through the room in waves. Olivia stepped onto the stage, one slow step at a time, her shoulders straight, her gaze forward. The lights were hot, the air thick, but she walked like she belonged there, like someone who had carried others through storms and finally allowed herself the warmth of the sun. The crowd hushed again. Lucas held the medal in his hands, a silver disc engraved with her name and the words, "National Courage Award." He placed it gently around her neck, his fingers lingering for just a second, as if anchoring the moment in time. Olivia leaned toward the microphone. Her voice, when it came, was calm and steady, like a song hummed through generations. "I ain't no hero," she began, her southern drawl soft but proud. "I'm just a woman who saw a boy who needed help, and I couldn't walk away." She paused. A silence fell across the ballroom. Even the cameras seemed to wait. "Sometimes," she said, her voice dipping lower, "the kindest thing you can do is stay. Even when it costs you. Even when the world says not to." She stepped back, and the room erupted. Applause thundered against the walls. People clapped until their palms stung. A few even stood on their chairs. Some wiped their eyes. Others cheered with their whole hearts, as if the applause could carry her higher than the chandeliers. That night, Olivia didn't fly home right away. Instead, she and Lucas found a quiet corner in the lobby of their hotel, far from the glitter and gold. A pair of cocoa cups sat on the table between them, steam curling like whispered prayers. They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. The moment itself was enough. Finally, Lucas looked up. Do you think, he asked, that things happen for a reason? Olivia turned her eyes toward the window. Outside, the city sparkled. Cars passed. Lights blinked. Life went on. I think, she said slowly, that kindness is the reason. And with that, they smiled at one another, two souls stitched together by fate, or maybe something better. Not luck, not chance, but choice. The story of Olivia Miller didn't end on that street in Austin, or in a clinic, or even under the chandeliers of a grand ballroom. It lived on, in the children who walked through the doors of the Olivia Miller Learning Center, in the scholarships mailed to students whose hands trembled as they opened the envelopes, in the new murals painted on old brick walls, in every porch where people sat longer, talked louder, listened better, in every stranger who now stopped to help, and in every heart that beat a little stronger because someone, somewhere, had once chosen to stay. Long after the TV broadcasts ended, after the newspaper clippings yellowed, her name didn't fade, because Olivia didn't carve her legacy in stone. She etched it into lives. In a world where it's easy to look away, true courage is found in those who stay. Olivia Miller didn't have wealth, power, or a title, but she had something far greater: compassion. Her choice to help a stranger rippled out to change an entire town. This story reminds us that even the smallest acts of kindness can echo far beyond what we imagine. Sometimes, being a hero doesn't mean doing the impossible. It means showing up when it matters most. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful tale. Let's keep spreading hope, one story at a time.